I am currently divorced from my ex Thomas of 30 years. We ended up seeing a lawyer to help with dividing stuff. Everything was pretty much wrapped up till he said he no longer wanted any part of our kids' lives. I didn't argue with him about it since I already know what it's like having a parent who doesn't want you around, or wants to be in your life. I asked what he wanted me to tell the kids and he just said, "Whatever you think is best, I don't care. I don't want to parent anymore." Everything was in agreement and signed with no fuss. A few weeks later I get a call from my ex-mill asking if we could meet each other. When I came over she broke down crying and begging to let my ex see his kids again. I was confused about what she meant because not once did he contact me after meeting the lawyer. She went on about how my ex said he really missed them and that I was just a petty B*TCH for taking full custody. Also that he was crying for days about it. I told her my version of events and she called it BS, saying her son wouldn't lie like that, especially not about his kids. Then I decided to call him in front of her. He didn't know she and I were meeting that day. I said, "Hey, has a soccer game in a few days," which he did, and I was wondering if you wanted to go? I know he'd really love it and be happy to see you. He instantly said no. I already said I'm not doing this anymore. I asked, "Well, how do you think this is going to affect Denise, his mom?" She is over the moon about them. He just said she loves me more than the kids, so I doubt this will be an issue for her. After a bit more talking we finally hung up. Ex-Mill was straight-faced and nodded at everything that just happened. She asked me to leave and said we would be in touch. Later that day I got a call from my ex saying how it's my fault he was kicked out of his mom's house, and possibly will be taken off her will. Also that none of his family members will talk to him because of what ex-Mill heard. He threw a lot of insults at me before I hung up, and now him and his mates keep calling and texting me. My friend is saying I shouldn't have said anything in the first place and I ruined his life. Yes, I plan to let Denise see the kids because I know she just wants to give them the world along with the rest of his family. I met her 2 years ago when we worked together and quickly became very close. She helped me through the darkest times of my life. I was mid-split with an abusive ex when we met. And I helped her through some really tough and unimaginable things. There were lots of rumors at the time we were seeing each other and everyone assumed we were an item. But for the past 2 years our relationship has been purely platonic. She was my best friend, and up until a few weeks back I don't think we'd even ever hugged. Fast forward to a week ago, she came over for dinner and wine. This is very common and normal. We had more than usual and she was over the limit so couldn't drive, so she stayed the night. We slept in the same bed but apart and no physical contact again. It was completely normal and just as expected. We somehow didn't get up and ended up staying in bed until 10 p.m. the next day just talking. Sometime during that evening she got upset about something going on in her life. I rubbed her back while telling her everything will be okay, and then we just cuddled. Probably the first bit of real physical contact between us, but nothing was sexual. Didn't feel weird, and she went home and it was all okay. This last weekend we had a hiking holiday planned, where we'd be sleeping in her van. She has a converted Transit. It's one bed but we thought we'd be fine. First night it was freezing, ending up cuddling and spooning but again didn't feel sexual. Second night is where it all went a bit wrong. We drank a bit too much and the spoon ended up getting carried away. It seems to be a joint thing, and before I knew it we were kissing and touching each other everywhere. It was a bit of a frenzy of this for about 15 minutes until we both stopped and realized what we just did. After this we spoke a little and asked if either of us regretted it. We both said we didn't, but it was odd. She got upset and I told her it was okay. It didn't change anything and we could just draw a line under it. We woke up the next morning and it happened again. We didn't talk too much but then went for a walk, and then just before we headed home we ended up all over each other again. We were completely naked but again stopped, cuddled and lay there. We both agreed it was a what happens in X, stays in X type event. It was a really long trip home, 6 hours plus. During this she would rest her head on my hand on lap ECT, and it seemed very different to our usual dynamic. When we stopped at services for breaks we seemed to walk arm in arm. We kept kissing on and off but it seemed strangely normal. We arrived back at her home. She lives with her dad at the moment, but just before I left she kissed me again and thanked me for a wonderful weekend. The following day she came over to get some stuff I took home with me. We end up just cuddling, kissing. feeling and so on again, but she has dinner with a friend and we stop it there. She goes on her way. This should feel really weird and strange, but it felt completely normal and we both discussed it that it was so odd it felt normal. Yesterday she turned up unannounced at my place, which is not a normal thing, with coffee and donuts. We end up talking, cuddling, kissing again, and then we end up talking about what this is, the big problem. Neither of us were sure. She got panicky and burst out in tears and left. She said she was really scared and her words were, "I think I will end up pushing you away and hurting you and I don't want to do that to you." I told her I would come and see her later and talk. I drove to her house, but her ex was there, another slight issue. They broke up 6 years ago, stayed close friends. He is a lovely bloke, but in his head he is certain they will get married and have children. She's had the conversation with him, but he seems to shut it off. If he found out she was seeing anyone he would get extremely angry. But there's so much family history intertwined between the both, it's really complicated. For that reason she has avoided seeing anyone in the past 6 years. The reason he turned up is she hadn't responded to him since the night we kissed. I went home when I saw his car and just said she could come to mine to chat later. She turned up, sad and very emotional. She explained she ran off because she is terrified of losing our friendship. I said let's just cut the romance out. Draw a line under it and be friends again, but she seemed to not speak much when I said this. I asked if her ex was the issue. She said it was nothing to do with us but a whole other issue. But that was not impacting what was going on between us. We sat quietly, hugged, and I tried to reassure it would be okay, and I wasn't going to start hating her for whatever reason. And I am completely fine with just being platonic friends again. We both agree and say whatever happens we stay friends and nobody gets hurt, but we will pull back from the more physical side. I woke up this morning really panicky. I have no idea where we are, where we stand, and absolutely terrified of losing our friendship. I don't know what to do or say. I felt sick to my stomach and can't eat at the thought of this. She is coming around later to collect some of her clothes she left last night, and I am thinking I need a plan of what to say / do. I cannot lose my best friend. She is absolutely everything to me, but I am worried we crossed a line and there's only one eventual outcome which won't be good. I met my husband 6 years ago when we both had just graduated college. He was a lovely guy, handsome and very well put together. He loved muscle cars and weightlifting, and I loved everything about him. I fell in love with him instantly and was over the moon when he asked me to marry him. A year into our marriage, I became pregnant with our son and gained about 30 pounds. I was 5 feet 3 inches. 125 pounds before the baby and 155 pounds after the baby. I still fit into the same clothing sizes, so I didn't think I had gained too much weight and that it would come off with breastfeeding and some more exercise. After the baby, my husband started pressuring me to lose the weight. He said that his friends were making comments about how fat I had gotten and that he was not as attracted to me as he was before I had the baby. He gave me an ultimatum that I either would have to lose the 30 pounds in 6 months or he would leave me. I was very upset about the demand, but I didn't want to lose him, so I tried my hardest to lose the weight. Every day for months I would wake up and go to hot yoga for 90 minutes. After I got home from work, I would run or do some bodyweight exercises. I tried to keep my calorie count below 1200 so that I would lose 2 or more lbs per week. The weight slowly but surely started to come off and I was back down to 130 pounds by the end of the 6 months. My husband was happy and things looked like they would be okay. After I lost the weight, I noticed a shift in the attitude of my husband's friends. Most of them are perfectly nice guys, but a few of them are absolute pieces of shit, the same ones who called me fat. Once I returned to my old weight, these friends started to make comments about me and how sexy I was. I told my husband to make them stop and he said that he would speak with them, but the rude comments never stopped. I channeled all of my frustrations into working out and I lost an additional 15 pounds of body fat and got more toned. This past weekend, my husband's friends were over at the house and one of them grabbed me and tried to grope me. I told my husband, and even though he was angry at his friend, he was still angry at me. My husband said that I was leading his friends on by losing so much weight, and that I was trying to make myself skinny so that I could cheat on him. I was disgusted by this accusation and packed my bags and left for my mom's house. Last night, my husband called me and begged for me to come back home. He says that he knows that he was unfair and that he won't let his friend come over anymore. But I am so tired of dealing with this that I'm not sure I want him back. He's the one that told me to lose weight. But now he's blaming me for being too skinny, and I'm afraid he's going to make me develop an eating disorder. But I also still love my husband, and it hurts me to be apart from him. My dad died, and I'm scared my family won't get along. So yesterday after my dad comes home, he eats what my mom made for him. Eggs and Spam. To be clear, he has a pre-existing medical history of high blood pressure and gout. First found out when he was admitted to the hospital in 2015 when he fell ill, and we basically had to force him to go to the hospital. He didn't want to go. He was put on medication since, with changes to them maybe a year or so ago. So back to when after he ate. My half-sister heard a thud around 740-ish and told me to check. She thought maybe my parents are arguing. I go down and see my dad on the kitchen floor, my mom behind him a few feet away, and I hear him snoring. I ask my mom a question, get worried, run back upstairs and knock on my sister's door. She calls my other sister and also tells me to stop wasting time, call 911. I was scared and frantic. I wish I called 911 or saw him when he came in so I could maybe have called sooner. They get frantic too and we all start yelling at each other, and I try to maintain order also as I'm talking to 911 person. At some point in all of this, my brother-in-law yells for help and I help him turn my dad onto his side. He said he could choke on his saliva. My dad stops snoring and we start panicking. The EMS tells us how to perform CPR, but my sisters keep yelling, and so I try to get them working together. They finally start working on it. One is doing compression and the other giving him air and sometimes rotating. Fire department and ambulance gets here and they start doing the same thing but also have defibrillators, and honestly, I'm just in shock still. It was maybe 8:03 p.m. when they came or so, I don't remember, it's all a blur. I checked my phone for timestamp, but I called twice so I forgot when original call was placed. They called it at 8:50 p.m. and I just began to lose it. My aunt comes and my sister is trying to call my dad's work to let his bosses know. We talk about how we want my dad's arrangements and agree on cremation. We don't have the money for anything else, but also my sister wants the remains. My mom is bipolar schizophrenic and my sisters and bro-in-law don't get along. Her because of a whole history that would keep you here forever if I tried to type it. My dad was a bad person, but he still chose us and tried his best to provide regardless of his fallacies. He had my mom's back too, saying he wouldn't kick her out or place her in a mental home. My sisters kinda want that, I think, but I'm scared to talk about it. My mom is okay sometimes but also acts up of her mental illness sometimes, and my dad and I were her constants regardless of what happened. My mom is old and still wants to benefit from some social security services that my dad had, but my sisters and I think we should get a majority control of his account. There's a lot of renovations to be done. He ignored upkeep of the house for a number of years, example, the roof. My mom is not very sad about the ordeal. She had a long history of mental abuse from my dad and I understand, but we for some reason stayed together. How to move forward except for one moment at a time, and I'm still waiting for funeral home to come pick up his body. It's 8:13 a.m. now, been waiting since night before. And I have been crying, but also I can't sleep, and I'm sorry if this doesn't meet guidelines. I just need to vent. Even though I told a few friends, I'm still in disbelief. How this will moving forward. I believe it can though. But it's hard to stay positive.